Let me introduce myself. I am the servant of the wondrous, powerful, almighty, terrifying, godly, commander and king, the Black Mutant. Lowry grabbed onto the bottom part of his jaw. There was a clicking sound. Lowry then showed the crew that he was a robot with circuits and electricity when he removed his face. The crew stood shocked. The robot put his face back on, then said, "If anyone moves within a foot of me, I shall terminate them." Is that clear? If anyone of you manages to destroy me, then the Black Mutant will beam down into this ship and terminate you. Who is the Black Mutant? Asked a crewman. The ruler of this universe. And with that, the robot turned the key. The submarine lightly shook as the Trident missile shot from its silo. "No!" shouted the crew. They couldn't believe that this was happening. To them, this meant the end of the world as they knew it. In the briefing room, the president had a evil, wicked smile on his face as the Black Mutant controlled his emotion, his actions and words. Wilson said, "Today, freedom has begun again. It is time that America quit wiping the world's ass. Now everyone is going to wipe America's. From this day on, everyone is going to be good to America. All the countries of this little planet are going to be nice to us." "What the hell is going on?" screamed a woman in the audience. He doesn't sound like the liberal I voted for." Wilson looked at her with disgust in his face and said, "That's right, bitch. I'm not. I'm no longer the pansy faggot you put in office. I'm the Black Mutant, and you shall worship me." Everyone in the audience began to talk to each other with fear. "Shut up!" shouted Wilson. Wilson took off his glasses, crumpled them up, and threw them on one of the reporters. The reporter became quiet. Wilson looked evilly at Borsky, who couldn't believe his eyes at how his puppet was acting. Wilson said to the audience, while looking at Borsky, "From now on, every country had better be nice to America, or they will feel my wrath." Borsky looked at the people in the room with anger on his face, then shouted at Wilson, "Russia will never bow to America." Wilson grinned, smiled, and said, Then there will be no more Russia." All the reporters gasped when Wilson said that. Suddenly the vice president ran into the room and shouted, "Robert, one of our missiles is on a strike path with Leningrad," he said, looking like a ghost. Everyone screamed. Borsky looked evilly at Wilson and shouted, "How dare you! We will bury you!" Wilson looked up at the air, smiled, and said, "No, he will bury you." Wilson started laughing. As people in America and Russia scurried about, preparing for World War III, the Black Mutant fired a phaser from Black Tini and destroyed the missile. Everyone left their stations when they got news of the missile's destruction. Of the missile's destruction. The missile never existed, lied the mutant through Wilson. Whoever reported the missile approach to you was lying, but if Russia kept on intimidating us, then I'll assure you. Oh, whoever reported the missile approach to you was lying. But if Russia keeps on intimidating us, then I'll assure you, all that I won't bat one eye in pressing the button. It's a matter of fact. I'll actually relish the idea that I'm incinerating the Soviet Union. So, from now on, Russia had better be nice to America, or I'll destroy the world. I'll even enjoy watching its destruction. How's that? Suddenly Wilson blinked his eyes and asked, where am I? It wasn't long until the people thought Wilson had had a belt with insanity and was rushed to the Washington D.C. psycho ward. Please forgive me, Wilson said as he said on his knees to Borsky. All your threats must have made me crack under the pressure. Please, Borsky, please forgive me. I'll never do it again. Said Wilson in the room with the rubber walls. Borsky pulled out a gun from his pocket and shot Wilson in the head. Wilson went screaming around the room with a bullet in his head. Borsky then shot him in the head again, causing Wilson to fall down dead. Borsky then got rid of his fingerprints. Got rid of his fingerprints from the gun and then put the gun in the hands of the dead mental patient that one of Borsky's men had shot in the mouth while Borsky was shooting the president. After that, Borsky let all the reporters in and told them that one of the mental patients took his gun from him while he wasn't looking and killed the president with it, then killed himself. Why did he kill the president? Asked a reporter. I don't know, said Borsky. But when we put him in rubber-walled room, we heard the patient shout that he was going to kill him because he thought that the president was going to destroy world through not being friendly with Soviet Union. Isn't that right, Comrade Pinchkin? Asked Borsky to one of his KGB agents who was acting like a Secret Service man. That is right, Prime Minister Borsky, said the KGB officer, trying to do a country accent and failing badly. On Mutania, Newton had beamed back up to it and was getting scared to death from the reports of what he was hearing from Callisto and the media. I can't believe this, shouted Newton. The president threatened the Soviets with nuclear destruction, then died in a mental ward? It happened, said Callisto. Newton felt as though he were going to black out. He fell into his throne and just put his hands over his face. He looked up with despair and said, when we return to the future, nothing will be the same. Wilson never threatened the Soviet Union in history, and he didn't die by being killed in a mental hospital. How did he die? Asked Callisto. He died from a disease that destroyed his immune system. I think the disease was called AIDS. Oh, yes, AIDS, said Callisto. The news has been talking about it all the time on the airways. When did they find a cure for it? Asked Newton. Wasn't it 2003? I don't know. It was a queer's disease. I think, wasn't it? They like to be called gays, Callisto. Oh yes, that's right. Strange things they were. Newton walked over to the sensor station and said, Has any of the crew called back? Only Mason. He told us that he became shocked when an astronomer played with astronaut dolls as a kid. Oh, what were their names? Asked Newton. Callisto smiled, looked scared, and said, Doug Davis, Jeff Long, Captain Laser, Sergeant Storm, and Major Matt Mason, said Callisto. When Callisto said that, Newton blacked out onto the floor with fear. In Washington, D.C., the president's body was being put behind the door of a morgue. The vice president was in the White House, and Borsky and comrades were getting ready to leave for the Soviet Union. Why are you going back to Russia? Asked the vice president to Borsky. Borsky said, Me and U.S. President Wilson were like brothers. He was only U.S. President who really understood the wishes of Soviet Union. If you love Soviet Union like Wilson did, then maybe you and I can be friends. But right now, Mother Russia is calling me home, said Borsky. Suddenly Borsky's eyes widened with disbelief to see President Wilson walking from the White House cellar with his hand on his face, with his hand on his head. He seemed to be in pain. Everyone jumped with joy to see that it was Wilson. Borsky was happy to see that his puppet was still alive. An hour later, Wilson, alias Black Mutant, told the world that an imposter had broken into his room while he was sleeping and conked him on the head, and had his friends put him in the basement. Everyone became shocked to hear Wilson say that. How could he get so close to the White House without getting caught? Asked a reporter. Hey, he looked like me, didn't he? Asked him. As a matter of fact, he looked like me, didn't he? As a matter of fact, he was just like me, only he hated the Soviet Union. Isn't that crazy? I mean, only an insane person would hate the Soviet Union nowadays, huh? Everyone looked at each other, then agreed. I'm okay now, and I want to do my duty as president, to lead the world on a course of peace, brotherhood, and I must not forget, loving goodwill to man. Quite a difference from what that mean old duplicate was saying, huh? How are you going to accomplish this? Asked a reporter. Isn't this just more of the same old promises that all politicians say? Wilson showed his teeth angrily, then said, "You will soon see just how much I love. You will just soon see just how much love America is going to bring about within the next few hours. I repeat, hours, not centuries, hours." How are you going to do that? Asked a reporter. The Black Mutant soon discovered that his teeth were showing, so he hid them and said, "By getting rid of our military, for one." "What?" asked the people. Borsky smiled with delight. Wilson looked at Borsky and said, "I knew that would make you happy." He turned to the audience and said, "We are no longer going to spend billions of dollars to feed an army, or an air force, or a navy that doesn't have submarines. From now on, all our submarines are going to carry lasers. All our tanks, lasers and missiles, not batteries, not bombs. All jets, lasers and missiles. No soldiers, just missiles. And if Lebanon doesn't return a U.S. hostage within an hour, then one of the missiles that are aimed at our beloved Soviet Union will vaporize Tehran. And if Panama refuses to give the canal back to America in writing, Cuba will be destroyed by next week with 5 nuclear-tipped old-fashioned fusion warheads. But we will not use one on the beautiful Soviet Union. Okay, Mr. Russian?" asked Wilson, mutant to Borsky. All over the world, the United States was now more feared than Russia. "What are we going to do with all those unemployed soldiers?" asked a reporter. "Well, since the Soviets are so military-minded, I think Borsky will let them into his country. That way he can let the Jews go free." "What if they don't want to go?" asked another reporter. "Oh, I had decided to bring back the death penalty to all those who refuse to work. They'll go. Nice, friendly Russia needs as many soldiers as possible." "Why?" "It just does. So, If I decide to destroy Russia, or go to war with it, Russia will have a semi-fighting chance. You see, this world is getting overpopulated. No one wanted another Vietnam in Central America or the Middle East, so we just might have to have one in Russia. Is that all right with you, Borsky? Asked Wilson with a smile. Borsky didn't know what to say. He was speechless like everyone else. Good. Good day. Good day? Said Wilson, leaving the podium. A few minutes later, everyone was talking about impeaching President Wilson. He's not well, said everyone. Borsky walked into the room of Wilson's bedroom. Wilson Mutant was sitting on the chair, smiling at Borsky. Borsky walked up to Wilson with an angry, vicious expression on his face and started slapping Wilson in the face, not realizing the danger he was now in, and said angrily, "What you mean you had better be treated nicely, or else? Why you acting so tough all the sudden? No one has to be nice to America. America has to be nice to Soviet Union, and you had better be nice to Borsky, or I will." Borsky pointed to the gun in his pocket. Wilson looked sad. "Now that is what I like to see," said Borsky, stroking Wilson's head. Suddenly, Borsky's eyes bulged with terror to see Wilson grab his testicles. "No!" shouted Borsky in horror. Wilson looked up slowly with a tired yet insane smile on his face and smiled, saying, "Sorry," and smiled evilly with a vice-like grip around Borsky's testicles. "No, please," begged Borsky. "On your knees before me," snickered the Black Mutant through Wilson's mouth. Borsky tried to reach down to take his hand from his testicles, but he suddenly stopped dead still when he felt the metallic, vice-like grip of the Black Mutant tighten up a little, causing Borsky to whimper. Borsky suddenly grabbed the Black Mutant by the balls and shouted, "Go ahead. If you squeeze mine, I'll squeeze yours." "Go ahead," snickered the Black Mutant. "Squeeze as hard and strong as you can. I love the pain. And when you do, I'll squeeze yours. I'll squeeze so hard, believe it or not, that you will fall unconscious. Isn't that funny? Maybe you can, and when you come to from the pain, guess where my missiles will be traveling." Borsky didn't say anything, but just stared at the hand that held his testicles. The Black Mutant began slapping Borsky across the face. Borsky began to cry out in pain, but suddenly shut up when the mutant tightened his grip on his testicles even harder, shouting, "Ah, you want to press the button?" screamed the mutant with... "You want me to press the button?" screamed the mutant with insanity. "No!" cried Borsky. "Well, good, because believe it or not, I don't like you. As a matter of fact, I think I hate you. And you want to know something really shocking? I think I can say that I and all the rest of the world would like to see me squeeze your balls to the point of running egg yolks. Yes, and if you really scratched them, I think everyone would fall down." Yes, fall down on their knees and worship me if I incinerated every town, city, and stinking village in that hellish, stupid wasteland known as Russia. I mean, even if everyone in the world became riddled with cancer from your radioactive dust, they would still cheer and worship me from having you and all the other bearskin-headed bastards fried into vapor. Do I make myself clear to you?" screamed the Black Mutant with fury. So loud and thundering was the Black Mutant's voice that it caused people to knock on the door to see what was wrong. The Black Mutant made Wilson really look insane and furious. He stared and started breathing harder and harder, showing his teeth and with saliva. coming through them. The pounding on the door increased. Barsky was whimpering like Wilson used to. Sweat was pouring off of him. Suddenly Barsky became even more terror-stricken when he noticed that Wilson's skin was beginning to crack up, and his eyes were glowing red. He felt the mutant's grip tightening on him. Barsky suddenly started screaming when Wilson's face crumpled away from the black mutant, showing nothing but a shiny, pitch-black face with two yellow glowing eyes. So horrifying and so horrifyingly hideous did the mutant look to Barsky that Barsky passed out. Right as the Secret Service agents were about to crash down the room, the black mutant quickly beamed back up to his ship. Everyone became shocked to find Barsky alone and unconscious on the floor, and President Wilson to be missing. All over the world, news bulletins flashed that the president was missing. Barsky then decided to go back to Russia. He didn't know what to think of his experience. This next story I'm about to read to you is called Newtin in the USSR. In orbit, Callisto had spotted the mutant's ship. Newton beamed up off the Earth and watched Blacktania on the screen. Newton then decided to call all his crew together. "Are you going to attack Blacktania?" asked Callisto. Newton didn't know. What if the ship exploded and killed millions of people on Earth? "I've got to somehow get Blacktania away from the orbit of Earth," said Newton. A few minutes later, everyone had beamed back up to Mutania except for Sergeant Storm. In Moscow, a KGB officer became puzzled when he noticed that Sergeant Storm's communicator was ringing. He picked it up and heard Newton say, "Storm, why haven't you signaled to be beamed up? To beam back?" The Russian then said, "Hello-ski." A look of terror creeped onto Newton's face. He turned to his crew and said, "My crew, something has happened to Storm, and I'm afraid I know." "Do you think he was captured as the spy Russia said it caught last week?" asked Mason. "Yes, and I'm pretty sure Russia will hold him prisoner in exchange for more vital strategic secrets. My crew, I'm going down there to see if I can get Storm back. They're probably torturing him to find out why he was in the USSR without a passport." And Newton went down to the transporter to beam down into Moscow. On his way down to the transporter, Callisto stopped him and asked, You are going down in your spacesuit?" "Yes. That way I can be caught, and maybe, just maybe, they will take me to Storm. I'll leave my phaser here. I'm afraid that I might accidentally kill someone down there if I had my phaser, and we sure don't want to do that, do we?" And several minutes later, Newton was standing in Red Square where Storm beamed down to eat ice cream. It wasn't long until Newton met the same KGB officer who took him to the same interrogation room where he didn't have a passport. What is it with you Americans?" asked the KGB officer. "Don't you know that you will be thrown in a gulag if you don't have passport?" Newton said, "I want you to take me to my friend. He wore a spacesuit exactly like this one, exactly like mine, only his is red colored. Do you know where he is?"